Hello. Alright, so I promised to make a video where I can compare the sound of my new mic to the video I made with my earbuds, or my earpods. So I got the Zeal Sound K66 for about $30. It's been working really well for my classes, and I've been told that there might be some interest in me starting like a YouTube channel or a podcast or something where I sort of talk about literature, rhetoric and composition, writing, grammar, and that sort of thing. So I thought I would do a little test video, see what you thought, and if you're interested in more, I can make more sort of mini lessons where I talk about pretty much what I teach in class, which is just rhetoric and composition, a mix of grammar, analyzing text, looking for bias, things like that. So, in this test video today, all I want to do is read to you the original telling, the original story of Little Red Riding Hood. Because if I make more videos, that is the story I use as my example of analysis. I go through, I talk about the archetypes, I talk about the lessons presented in the story, when it was written, who it was written for, and sort of our misconceptions there, because we tend to think that Little Red Riding Hood was a children's story, and it was not. It was originally intended for an adult audience, and has with it very adult lessons and warnings that we don't see until we realize who it was written for, when it was written, and, basically who the audience was. So, there's that. And I guess, without further ado, I shall read the story and see if you're interested in my take as to why it is an adult story with adult lessons about morality. Specifically, I believe my thesis statement is, it is a story warning young women against the dangers of promiscuity. Okay, I do teach adults, by the way. So this is a written out text for the original story. The story was originally probably orally told in 1695 by Charles Perrault to King Louis's court in Versailles. Okay, so the story of Little Red Riding Hood. Once upon a time there lived in a certain village a little country girl, the prettiest creature who was ever seen. Her mother was excessively fond of her, and her grandmother doted on her still more. This good woman had a little Red Riding Hood made for her. It suited the girl so extremely well that everyone called her Little Red Riding Hood. One day her mother, having made some cakes, said to her, "Go, my dear, and see how your grandmother is doing, for I hear she has been very ill. Take her a cake and this little pot of butter." Little Red Riding Hood set out immediately to go see her grandmother, who lived in another village. As she was going through the wood, she met a wolf, who had a very great mind to eat her up, but he dared not, because of some woodcutters working nearby in the forest. He asked her where she was going. The poor child, who did not know that it was dangerous to stay and talk to a wolf, said to him, "I am going to see my grandmother, and carry her a cake and a little pot of butter from my mother." "Does she live far off?" said the wolf. "Oh, I say," answered Little Red Riding Hood, "it is beyond that mill you see there, at the first house in the village." "Well," said the wolf, "I'll go and see her too. I'll go this way, and go you that, and we shall see who will be there first." The wolf ran as fast as he could, taking the shortest path, and the little girl took a roundabout way, entertaining herself by gathering nuts, running after butterflies, and gathering bouquets of little flowers. It was not long before the wolf arrived at the old woman's house. He knocked at the door. Tap, tap. "Who's there?" "Your grandchild, Little Red Riding Hood," replied the wolf, counterfeiting her voice, "who has brought you a cake and a little pot of butter sent to you by mother." The good woman, who was in bed because she was somewhat ill, cried out, "Pull the bobbin, and the latch will go up." The wolf pulled the bobbin, and the door opened, and then he immediately fell upon the good woman and ate her up in a moment, for it had been more than 3 days since he had eaten. He then shut the door and got into the grandmother's bed, expecting Little Red Riding Hood, who came some time afterward and knocked at the door. Tap, tap. "Who's there?" Little Red, hearing the big voice of the wolf, was at first afraid, but believing her grandmother had a cold and was hoarse, answered, "It is your grandchild, Little Red Riding Hood, who has brought you a cake and a little pot of butter mother sends you." The wolf cried out to her, softening his voice as much as he could, "Pull the bobbin and the latch will go up." Little Red Riding Hood pulled the bobbin and the door opened. The wolf, seeing her come in, said to her, hiding himself under the bedclothes, "Put the cake and the little pot of butter upon the stool, and come get into bed with me." Little Red Riding Hood took off her clothes and got into bed. She was greatly amazed to see how her grandmother looked in her night clothes, and said to her, "Grandmother, what big arms you have!" "All the better to hug you with, my dear." "Grandmother, what big legs you have!" "All the better to run with, my child." "Grandmother, what big ears you have!" "All the better to hear with, my child." "Grandmother, what big eyes you have!" "All the better to see with, my child." "Grandmother, what big teeth you've got!" "All the better to eat you up with." In saying these words, this wicked wolf fell upon Little Red Riding Hood and ate her all up. And now there's a moral to the story that we don't often hear. Children, especially attractive, well-bred young ladies, should never talk to strangers, for if they should do so, they may well provide dinner for a wolf. I say wolf, but there are various kinds of wolves. There are also those who are charming, quiet, polite, unassuming, complacent, and sweet, who pursue young women at home and in the streets. And unfortunately, it is these gentle wolves who are the most dangerous ones of all. All right, so the moral of the story kind of gives way to my interpretation, which is, again, this was presented to adults in King Louis's court in Versailles. And that moral really hints at, ladies, there are very dangerous wolves among you who will pursue women at home and in the streets. Streets. You get my point. So I have a couple of ways I like to go about interpreting this. I like bringing in outside sources, talking about the story, talking about some of the hidden innuendos you might not have picked up because you think it's a children's story when actually it was very well meant for women, adult women, in King Louis's court who were facing some very dangerous wolves. All right, that's all I've got for now. If you're interested, please let me know and I will make more videos similar to this.